I think our role is to ensure that governments understand the opportunity that exists here, and I think we're doing a good job at that, but also to better understand the role that they have to play, in the same way as they played a role in the transition to solar and wind for the benefit of the environment. They have a significant role to play in the transition from, traditional jet kerosene to sustainable aviation fuel, and we can't do it on our own. We just don't have the financial ability to do this on our own. We have to work with others, and governments need to provide the policy framework, the right incentives. They need to be very clear that the measures they're taking have the intended consequences, and recognise that when they have unintended consequences that they need to change that. Politicians are slow to acknowledge mistakes, and often persist in doing things that are wrong, because they prefer to do that than to put their hand up and say they need to go back. So we've got to work with governments and regulators and everybody to ensure that greater supply of sustainable aviation fuel is made available, and that's going to have to be working together. As I said, we can't do it on our own. We rely on lots of other partners to deliver on this, but governments have a very important role to play to ensure that the framework is there to incentivise greater production. We are seeing an increase in the level of sustainable aviation fuel being produced, but it's still at very low quantities compared to what we need. So I think we've estimated it'll be just over 0.5% of the fuel that we'll use this year. Now, it's going in the right direction, but that's slow and incremental growth, and we need to see a step change. I think the positive is we are seeing significant investment in certain parts of the world, particularly the US, in facilities to produce more sustainable fuel. And in fact, I'm hearing more and more exciting stories coming out of the US, where the government at a federal level has provided incentives and tax breaks, and at state level there's some incentives as well. So the story in the US is actually quite encouraging. We need to ensure that that story is heard by other governments around the world, and that the lessons from what the US is doing can be learnt. But there's a clear difference between what the US is doing, where they're incentivizing, if you like, using the carrot approach, to what the EU is doing, which is very much the stick. They're trying to beat people up, and it's not working. In fact, it's ridiculous what we're seeing there. Zero environmental benefit. If I look at France, where they have a blending mandate, which requires fuel companies to produce SAF to blend. The fuel companies aren't doing it, but they don't care, because the financial penalties that they're facing, they're just passing on to airlines, because they're a monopoly supplier. We don't have an option. So it's done zero, absolutely nothing to improve the production of sustainable fuel, and has just merely added to the cost of operating, which ultimately gets borne by the consumer. So no environmental impact and negative economic impact.